great deal of ground over the past few weeks, both in freight and all sorts of other subjects. And in freight and logistics, of course, we've walked the gamut of everything from specific horizontals and verticals all the way through to general sessions. So I thought it appropriate that today we would pause and look at the future of freight and logistics, and of course the implications that that has for your business. So if we look in summary at what the future holds, and these are things that we know these things are definitely going to occur. So first of all, it's highly unlikely that freight rates, both sea and air, are likely to come down over the course of the next 12 months. Freight rates are high as a result of COVID and various other disruptions that have occurred across supply chains and the freight and logistics industry, and those rates will remain high. There is likely to be continued pressure on free time as far as particularly sea freight is concerned. Carriers are also likely to show increased capacity discipline, which will result in more blank sailings and a renewed focus on profitability over market share. So really, the industry is not out to win friends and influence people. They are really going to try to improve their profitability as much as possible. More government intervention is also likely. 2020 saw both China's Ministry of Transport and the US Federal Maritime Commission get more involved in the ocean freight business, and other governments are likely to follow. And of course, this also goes to subsidies and support mechanisms for exporters, of which we have our own. There will also be an ever-increasing emphasis on technology as time goes by, because of course technology means fewer people, more efficient processes, etc. So we can certainly expect to see more of that as we go along. So let's look at what we're going to be covering off on today's session. First of all, we're going to be looking at changes in customer expectations, because those, of course, drive the way in which all businesses have to fulfill orders and the way in which they are going to interact with their freight and logistics part of the supply chain. We're also going to pause and look at the physical internet, technology innovations, and then a little bit of a fun section where we do some real crystal ball gazing into some of the technology coming up. And no, it's not the Jetsons. So let's start off by looking at some of those changes in customer expectations. And these have been particularly marked over the past 18 months. And probably the last 12 have really seen some of these changes taking hold. So as operating models and profitability come under strain, the pace of transformation for large manufacturing and retail customers is fast and getting faster. So some of those B2B customer trends, it has become all about the CX, or the customer experience. So just as in the B2B, or rather the B2C sector, B2B customers are also wanting an improved experience. They want greater communication, they want greater involvement, and much of this will be technology driven. And it's quite interesting because a lot of what is expected in the B2B space now is being driven by what people have come to expect over the last 12 to 18 months through their experiences of shopping online and their B2C experiences. There's also an increased striving for efficiency and transparency. Manufacturing industries are facing far greater expectations around efficiency and performance than ever before. Customers are expecting faster time to market, reduced defect rates, and customized products. And of course, all of this is going to be enabled by data analytics. The better you are at understanding your processes, your procedures, your customers, and your end-to-end supply chain, the better it will be and the easier it will be if you are able to efficiently analyze the data. And as we move through today's session, we're going to look at how technology is going to shape some of the changes that we can see coming. There are also new shopping patterns. So as I mentioned, e-commerce has driven a lot of this. And of course, e-commerce is growing across sectors worldwide. The e-commerce delivery model is having an effect on the expectations of B2B customers who are coming to expect a similar level of personalization, shorter lead times, etc. It's quite interesting to note that a lot of this behavior is being driven out of Asia, where in markets like Singapore, for example, as younger and younger people are moving into middle and top management, those people are also more inclined to be shopping online from a personal perspective, and their behaviors are similar when it comes to procurement processes in the B2B space. They don't see why there should be any difference in the experience, and they expect their B2B suppliers to be just as agile. So one of the main things that is driving the way in which businesses are interacting across supply chains, and also the way in which businesses are interacting with their customers through their logistic providers, is the physical internet. And this is not a new concept. It has been around since 2011, when the phrase physical internet was first coined by Professor Benoit Montreal of the Georgia Technology Institute. The physical internet, or PI for short, or the symbol for pi, is based on the idea that physical objects can be more efficiently moved around if they become more standardized and share common channels. So pretty much like data packets on the internet. This requires modularization and standard interfaces and protocols. And in addition, hubs and networks across transport modes need to be better synchronized. IT applications and networks also need to operate better together. So it's really quite an interesting concept. We've all become very familiar with the way things work on the internet, the way everything on the World Wide Web is connected. But in the physical world, of course, it takes a little bit more effort for that to occur. But that is very much the concept behind the physical internet. Now, what does this mean for the future of freight and logistics? Well, essentially, people involved in the physical internet increase their efficiency, they reduce their environmental impact by collaborating more, and they develop new business models such as sharing networks. Research around the physical internet leads to shared standards for shipment sizes, greater modal connectivity, and software and technology requirements across carriers. Increased efficiency leads to lower costs for LSPs, and they may pass some of this benefit onto their customers. Companies can consider investing in transportation assets and thereby secure superior service and rates from a trusted long-term partnership. And this is already being seen in the US, where, for example, the retailer Home Depot is investing in its own ships to reduce its reliance on shipping lines. Now, usually service levels and efficiency are very high in urban areas, but not so in rural communities that are generally only served by national posts with universal service obligations. The regional focus of CEP providers will enhance the service level for customers, especially in isolated areas along less profitable routes. So as the physical internet takes hold, it spreads just as the World Wide Web has, and it reaches all those pockets that in the past were pretty much forgotten. So the next component we're going to be looking at this afternoon is digitalization and technology innovations in the freight and logistics space. So there are some prominent areas of disruption in logistics data management and availability, the new ways in which physical transport is being implemented, the use of digital platforms for customer-client interactions, and robust financials and accounts management. So let's look at some of these in a little bit more detail. So when it comes to logistics, data management and availability, of course, wherever large amounts of data and analysis are involved, we see processes evolving in freight and logistics. And wherever it's necessary to do more of that analysis and mine the data more efficiently, technology will play an important role in streamlining the process. The drawbacks of the traditional system can be seen in the lack of real-time updates for data, route optimizations, and delivery tracking methods, which can be bridged by technology. And I think it's fair to say that the freight and logistics industry has in the past been quite slow to adopt technology, but that is changing dramatically in recent times. The shareability and availability of this logistic data for all concerned parties are what really makes the system efficient. So these provisions, along with the inclusion of real-time analysis, AI-based interventions, and IoT-based operatives, will further enhance the system for any freight and logistics company. And as the freight and logistics providers are improving their efficiency, so too will you as a business be able to improve yours. Businesses have been adopting technology at a rate of knots, particularly over the last 18 months with the advent of COVID. And the logistics and freight industry is now at the point where they are catching up. So all those systems and processes that you have been working to streamline and refine over the last 18 months will now be able to efficiently work with those of your freight service providers. Robust financial and accounts management is another area where technology is making a real impact. So financial management, invoicing, resources, allocation, etc., has again in the freight and logistics industry been fairly traditional, with very little use of technology in the past. But this is changing. Artificial intelligence and big data analytics are of great significance in analyzing business models, routes, locations, and where the maximum profits are incurred. So where the freight and logistics companies are maximizing their return on investment is where they are most likely to be implementing technology. Companies can consequently use all of these technologies to strategize finances and resources for the management of these areas and to make the business operate more efficiently. And that applies not just to the freight and logistics industry, but also to your own business and the freight and the logistics component of your supply chain and your end-to-end supply chain management. Even basic account management and resource allocations can be highly improved with digitization. And of course, this saves manpower for the more important, significant operations within the organization. Digital platforms are also being used more frequently for customer-client interactions. So the channel for communications forms a very important sector for any business in general, and the freight and logistics sector is no exception. One of the biggest disruptions in the industry is the use of digital platforms for the management of customers, warehousing, and even expense management and transactions. Businesses have pretty much been forced to plunge into the digital domain completely, with adequate marketing, advertising, and customer relationship management, seeing to it that they remain ahead of the curve. It's not enough, of course, just to have an app for your business. You also need to show customers why yours is better than many competitors and how the apps that you have in place are actually meaningful and useful. The use of digital platforms does make the process cost efficient and more streamlined for the company in the longer run. And it makes that interface between you and your customer and you and your fulfillment arm all the more efficient. Robotization and automation, a very thorny point when it comes to the freight and logistics sector, and there has been in the past a fair bit of resistance, particularly against automation. But as we move forward, systems will be able to connect with the environment, and companies can prepare for the integration of intelligence with material handling equipment. So workers will be operating intelligent machinery while working side by side with autonomous robotic processes like forklifts. And other operations will be highly automated. So as we move into an environment where we are considerably more concerned about the health of our employees and whether those employees are going to be able to work through another pandemic or through the existing pandemic that flares up every now and again, automation is being driven exponentially. The Internet of Things is very much on the forefront when it comes to the way in which technology is being implemented across the board in all manufacturing sectors and indeed in businesses as a whole. As it applies to freight and logistics, IoT refers to using databases, chips, readers, cloud-based systems, etc., to transmit information and to communicate with one another. It's pretty useless to have isolated silos of technology if those silos cannot communicate with one another, and IoT makes that possible. It's a way of getting inanimate objects such as parcels and containers essentially to speak to the cloud. They can communicate on their own behalf, and that information then feeds into other systems and processes. So using things like RFID, shipments can be tracked through the supply chain 24/7 without manual intervention. Advanced machine learning is also something that is becoming more and more prevalent. So through AML, companies can analyze data, identify patterns, make business decisions based on real-time performance. And this will enhance forecasting, resource utilization, it will reduce downtime, machine maintenance, etc. AML can also analyze which routes and ports are most cost effective. So if you as a business were to apply advanced machine learning, you will be able to make informed decisions when it comes to dealing with your logistics provider. You will no longer be just in their hands when it comes to where and how your products should be shipped. You will actually be able to make informed decisions and advise them about the best way to go. Of course, connectivity is improving all the time. And as 5G is being rolled out across the Australian network, this will only get better. 5G is going to change the way in which we are able to communicate dramatically because it is that much faster than 4G. And of course, when we put 5G together with IoT devices, well, the sky is pretty much the limit. And speaking about the sky, cloud-based solutions. So experts tell us that the freight industry will exponentially increase in productivity as data on the capacity of private fleets becomes more readily available. And by using cloud-based solutions, freight companies are able to reposition empty containers on the go, increase efficiency, productivity, and profits, and also keep track of where all those fleets are. And the same thing applies to you in your own business. And the great thing about cloud-based solutions, the initial outlay to implement is so much lower than if you were going to full enterprise solutions, for example. The days of outright purchasing software are gone. We're all using software as a service now, and the same thing applies to all the technology that you will be using to drive your supply chains and your freight and logistics. And finally, when we look at technology innovations, I just want to stop and look at blockchain. Now, much has been written about blockchain in the past. In some cases, blockchain is being seen as the panacea of all ills. Of course, it's not, but it is a very important link in the chain. The implementation of blockchain will be the next big development that improves existing processes, increases efficiency, and cuts costs. from customers being able to track products and trace the whole life cycle of their products, to shippers being able to verify all transactions during the flow of goods, information will be drastically more transparent. So effectively, blockchain enables a single ledger to be made accessible to all parties who can then judge authenticity, track origin, place of storage, and a whole gamut of other information as it relates to the supply chain. And the great thing about blockchain, it is secure. Of course, it does mean that you need to empower the people who work for you, and that applies across all the technologies that we've touched on today. People need to be upskilled, and then they need to be empowered to make the decisions that the technology enables. That is a very important aspect in all of this. Now, we've looked at some of the realistic, currently available and steadily being implemented technology. So I thought it would be quite fun today to end this series and today's webinar looking at some of the, well, let's call it the more out there tech innovations, all of which are already in existence, but the way in which they might apply to the freight and logistics sector and the way in which you might be moving your goods from yourself to the hands of your customers. So we start with maglev trains. Now, these, of course, are high-speed trains that operate using magnetic levitation from powerful electromagnets, and they operate in Asia, particularly in places like Japan. In addition to being safer and timelier than traditional trains, they also encounter fewer delays due to weather and other mechanical issues. So the future of maglev for public use is a certainty. It's already in use. It will be used more frequently as time goes by, but we've not really considered using maglev to move freight. But there's no reason why we wouldn't be able to. Of course, maglev isn't cheap, so that's the major thing against it. A line project, for example, that operates from Tokyo to Osaka is expected to cost a whopping $49 billion or more. But looking forward and gazing into that crystal ball, maglev could be a way to go. Delivery drones. Now, drone technology, of course, nothing new. It's used in all sorts of areas to do all sorts of things, including in warehouse and for the delivery of small packages in some parts of the world, but it does pose privacy and safety risks. So the important thing is that these flying robots need to be type certified for widespread use. And if and when they do become type certified, the technology should reduce road congestions, traffic fatalities, because it will take delivery drivers off the road. Now, the US Federal Aviation Administration, that's been a real sticking point, has recently issued guidelines and certifications for unmanned aircraft systems that include commercial operators of drones up to the American 55 pounds. They also recently approved UPS drone delivery for prescription medication. So the interesting concept around drones, of course, is not so much that we're going to be reducing the number of people employed, we're just going to be reducing the way in which they are employed. So instead of someone sitting behind the wheel of a truck or of a delivery van or a scooter, they will be operating the drone because, of course, each drone has to be operated by somebody and effectively flown. One of the other fun and potentially quite useful things that we can think about is driverless cars and trucks. So, of course, autonomous vehicles promise to make our roads safer by using artificial intelligence, telematics, robotic technology, etc. It's not quite as far away as one might think. Tesla, as we all know, has come up with the technology, but Audi, Uber, Volkswagen, just about every major car manufacturer, if they have an electric vehicle, they're also exploring the possibilities of driverless cars and trucks. Now, driverless trucks are a particularly controversial topic in the freight industry. In the US alone, the trucking industry accounts for about 5% of all full-time jobs in the country. But of course, we're all aware, particularly those who are freighting at the moment into the US, aware of the current driver shortage in the US. So autonomous trucks may be the solution to the freight and logistics sector, particularly in the United States. Now, probably not going to be widespread anytime soon because there are concerns over insurance and liability. And every time there's a snafu with a driverless vehicle, of course, it does set the entire process back. But it is an interesting concept if we start thinking about freight and logistics moving without humans behind the wheel. Tunnels. So dear Elon Musk, who always comes up with interesting concepts, not necessarily practical, but nevertheless interesting. His Boring Company hopes to reduce traffic congestion using a series of underground tunnels in cities across the world. The technology wants to make roads 3D weatherproof, and it will effectively have cars lowering down underground on metal trolley-like platforms, and then they will be sent at high speed to other destinations. And the same thing, in theory, can be done with trucks. So while the company believes it can do this cost effectively, there are some big questions concerning infrastructure and logistics. Currently, they are prototyping a tunnel in LA, and it will be interesting to see how and when this might make it into the mainstream, just along with the Hyperloop. So another transportation concept is the Hyperloop that runs freight through a depressurized tube at speeds of 1,000 kilometers per hour or more. Now, some freight industry experts believe it could be faster and cheaper than air transport, and that's why there is already investment by DP World Cargo Speed. And they seem to think they're going to have something that they can test by the end of this year. So I think we'll all be watching with great interest to see if the freight Hyperloop becomes a reality. It's not just cars, trucks, trains that are getting smarter. Our roads are too. So smart roads hope to improve the safety of road travel by using highways that are studded with sensors to alert drivers of a crash nearby. It will also communicate things like adverse weather conditions, traffic delays, etc., all of it in real time. And yes, we know that our GPS systems are already doing a great deal of this, but the roads will be a lot more agile and more attuned to what is going on them. So smart roads, when implemented, could improve the safety of drivers and cargo. And it's in the US, for example, 70% of all goods are transported via truck. Of course, it could also help to optimize transportation routes because the road will say, you need to get off me at the next intersection because my partner road up the way has said that they are too congested to take you. It will certainly help to speed up deliveries and cut transportation costs. Of course, with all of these innovations, to get the technology finalized and implemented is very expensive. Now, finally, the important concept that is a concept but is not that far off that I would like to touch on is that of autonomous ships. Between 75 and 96% of all maritime accidents are caused by human error. Autonomous ships certainly hope to reduce those accidents while increasing efficiency and delivery speed in waterways. And it will, of course, also reduce crew-related costs. And if those costs come down, the freight costs should follow. Now, before autonomous ships do become a mainstream reality, of course, international laws will need to be changed to ensure safety, and regulations will need to be updated to accommodate autonomous operations. So at the moment, there's not a huge amount of money that's going into this. So the research is going to slow development down. It's more likely that driverless cars and trucks will make it first and then ships. Of course, having autonomous ships also means that things like piracy and so on could be reduced because you don't have people involved on the chain. Interesting things, looking into the future is always exciting. And as I said, a little bit of fun for us to end our series on for today.